So, Austin, what do you want to do today?
Same thing we do every day, Dennis. Try to conquer the world.
Let's do it.
What I want to know right up front, what in the world were we thinking with our podcast name? Now, people looking at this, Sensus Divina Podcastus.
I wish I could take credit for it, but really it's all you. And I mean, when I saw it initially, I laughed, but I'm like, man, that's really bold and outrageous.
Well,
maybe we can think of something.
My wife, when I told her, she said, have you lost your mind?
What did she say when you told her that we said yes to it?
She just shook her head like, no, you can't. Nobody has any idea. But here's the thing. How many people who are Reformed nerds will get what we're referencing? What do you think? You think all? That's what I told her. That's what I told her. I was like, no, 100%.
Yeah, 100%.
Now, how many people who are average churchgoers?
In the Reform circle, probably, I would say around 30%, 35%, maybe.
I mean, maybe.
Yeah, maybe even lower.
All right. So what are we referencing here? What is this a reference to? What is it playing off of?
Well, it's playing off of two things that I know. First of all, Sensus Divinitatis. It's the normal one. This, Calvin said the sense of God, the sense of the divine that all mankind has. But it's, it's also used sensus plenior and others as well. But yeah, it's this idea of sense of God. And so when you used it, were you using it to just say what? Sense of a divine podcast?
Basically, yes. People have an innate awareness that there is somewhere an ideal divine podcast.
And we are it.
We shall see, right?
No. Oh, we are it.
All right, so I have something else I want to do with you.
Yeah.
I have a yes or no question.
Uh-oh.
Now, all you can do is answer for right now, yes or no. Maybe later on in the podcast we'll explain why.
Do I have to?
You don't have to. You don't have to.
Okay, I probably will, because you asked nicely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, this occurred to me. I was listening to a podcast, and it hit me. When I think of radio hosts back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, what comes to your mind? In my mind, you have this very formal, a guy in a suit speaking very carefully and with dignity.
Yeah.
And as you slide through the decades up into the 60s, 70s, and by the 80s, you have and here's ZZ Top, and the way they're kind of talking. And now you've come to a point where when people are interviewing and when people are talking, it's so profoundly casual. There's still an element of in character, no doubt.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
But it's a very casual, wear your thoughts on your sleeve, authentic manner of speech. Even openly being crass. That's not an issue, right? So here's my question, yes or no?
Yep, okay.
Does this movement that we've seen over the last, let's say, 100 years, is it an indication of moral decline? Yes or no?
Can I say Ness? Like
Ness.
Combination of
in the middle? So you want to say Ness?
But
if you had to tilt one way, that's what makes it hard.
I would say no.
Okay, you say no. I'm gonna say no.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll come back, right?
We'll come back to it. But I say no. It does not mean a moral decline. And see, the question is so tough because
it is.
But I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no, and then I'm going to interpret the question so it fits my no answer.
All right. Help me remember, because I may remember. We need to come back.
Okay, we'll come back. I'm curious. I'll write a note.
Your reasoning. Okay. All right, and I have another thing here. I'm curious. What is something of note of significance since the last time we recorded? This could be a movie.
Right.
This could be a media, a Facebook, a book, an article. What is one thing since last we recorded that you would you'd want to draw attention to?
Oh man! Well, recently I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, Radio Lab, and they had a segment of people. Apparently, they get all these questions that they never, it's very difficult for them to answer all of them. So they picked a few out, and one of the questions were, how does a frisbee behave? I think I told you this.
Yeah, no, I listened to it. Yeah,
yeah. How does a frisbee? What a frisbee? Fly off in Mars? Like what would a frisbee do?
Yeah, because didn't they say it would only go a few feet or something?
Yeah, because of the density of the atmosphere. But the question itself to me was so profound because I started thinking to myself, well, wait a minute. Yes, if you take a frisbee made for Earth's atmosphere and put it in Mars, it would behave less Earth-like. And then I just began to think, well, maybe there's a frisbee you can make for Mars. Mars's sort of, atmosphere that would behave like a Mars frisbee and go pretty far. And then I sort of started thinking, well, there has to be sort of a spiritual application in this for us. I mean, we were made for Earth. And how the gospel, according to the book of Genesis, we fell into sin. And so now our bodies and our minds are very unearth-like, at least from the standpoint of not being the way it was originally made, and how God is in the business of probably making us back to how we were from the beginning.
I'm curious, did you pick that because of our topic we're going to be talking about? Because that ties in actually really well.
I didn't pick that. It's just that's just a truth that's really captured my heart about getting back to.
So fashion in a certain way for a certain environment.
Yeah.
And sin has marred that.
Yeah.
And why in the world is everything so difficult?
Why is everything in the world so difficult? And that's probably why, because we're like Mars people because of sin trying to live in Earth.
Frisbees on Mars.
Yeah, we're frisbees on exactly. We're frisbees on Mars. So anyway, that's it. What about you?
Boy, there's a bunch, but I'll tell you what, I watched a couple days ago now. We rented Dunkirk.
Oh.
Have you seen that?
I have not seen it, but I heard it's great.
Oh man, Christopher Nolan nailed this movie.
Oh wow.
And I'm not familiar really with the story. I guess it's more familiar to the British. Because it does revolve around the British and the French. Maybe my numbers are wrong, so forgive me, but I want to say it was like 400,000 people were on a beach looking to just get off this beach because the Germans were pressing down on them. And they're getting bombed. They're getting it's a desperate situation where actually fishermen cross the English Channel just in all these different boats, these little fisherman boats, just to get soldiers.
Oh, wow.
And it's this profound depiction of life in that situation, the desperation. They would get on these destroyers, and the destroyer would get bombed, and they're just out in this oil-soaked water and trying to get enough people on boats. Really intense. The musical score was amazing. I can't go on enough. It was really, really good, and really enjoyed it. So I would definitely encourage people to watch it. And interestingly enough, it's PG-13. It's violent, but not gruesome violent.
Okay.
But it's very intense.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I have to probably watch it then. I've seen it.
Yeah, worth watching.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll get to it.
Something to know. All right, well, let's take a break.
Yeah.
And we'll come back on our main topic.
All right.
All right, so Dennis, I kind of want to talk trolley problems. Now,
Choo-choo.
Yeah. Now, before we define it, and wrestle with exactly what we're talking about, I want to paint this picture for you. And you know I'm a movie guy, so I'm going to appeal to another movie here. Have you seen Eye in the Sky?
No.
Okay. Now, it's been a while since I've seen it, so let me just paint a really basic picture for you. So imagine somewhere in the Middle East, you have your eye through a drone and some people on the ground who are kind of close to the situation. You know of a terrorist in a building who is in process of strapping himself with a lot of explosives, and he's getting ready to go into a major city and kill a lot of people.
Wow. How do they know this? I'm just curious.
Through these cameras.
Okay.
On the drones. Yeah. I mean, they already know he's a suspected terrorist.
Okay.
They have every reason to believe he's going to do this, and he's actually physically, they can see him strapping bombs. They have this like little handheld camera thing that they can get up at a window and watch him.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so the government is wrestling with, we need to kill this guy. We need to drop a bomb on the building and just take him out.
Yeah.
Because there's no way to intercept him. They don't have men in position to intercept him before the city. So that's off the table.
Oh, wow.
So here he is in this building strapping bombs. They're getting ready to blow him up. But it's in a populated area. And out front, strolling along, is this little girl who's selling, I can't remember exactly, like bread, let's just say. So she sets up this little table right outside of the terrorist house to start selling bread. Suddenly things just got more complicated. Now, the question, of course, is, do you bomb the building, kill the little girl, more than likely, or do you let him go and perhaps kill dozens, if not hundreds, of people in the city? That's a tough call.
Yeah.
Now, I won't ruin the movie and tell you what they did, but that's what we mean by what, a trolley problem?
Yeah, essentially that's what a trolley problem is. It's a problem in which two equally moral or ethical decisions that would be a good one, right, are sort of brought into contact with each other and creates this conflict. So in this situation, you have the morally ethical thing of killing a bad guy.
Right.
Like, under normal circumstances, that's an easy decision.
Like if he were on an island all by himself, strapping bombs, getting ready to go somewhere, push the button.
The island would be no more.
The island would be no more.
Right? And then you have another situation where there's this cute little girl selling bread, undoubtedly for her family. Yeah. And there's a drone with bombs flying around. You would not just drop a bomb on her.
It would certainly give you pause.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, you just wouldn't randomly drop a bomb on a cute little girl. Yeah.
No, exactly.
Yeah. And it's just, but
not in the equation.
Not in the equation. Like, there's not somebody up there saying, like, oh man, let me find a cute little girl to bomb. Like, that's just not that's not happening.
Right.
So that's the two scenarios. Yeah. And so independently, those are fine. Those are good moral situations. But hey, let's bring those together. Yeah. And then now you have a trolley problem. Yeah. Now you have this problem.
Because the trolley problems play off the imagery of a trolley cart.
Yes.
You have a couple tracks. Yeah. One track, it's barreling out of control towards 4 people. But you could pull this lever, send the trolley down another track, and take out your brother.
Yes.
So the idea is to create these ethical conundrums where you go, 4 people? Well, that's more loss of life, but it's my brother.
Yeah. And one of the things that trolley problems do is they force you to wrestle with the issue. Are there some moral choices that are just better than others?
Yeah.
Are there some values? Are there some ethical situations that take a higher priority than something else?
So are we perverse to want to think through this?
I'm not going to answer that question.
I mean, there's
not a yes or no question.
I mean, when I hear people talk about trolley problems, the temptation is to go, well, that's just abstract. And does this ever really happen in the real life? But it kind of does.
It doesn't. Maybe. Okay, I thought about the same thing. I was sitting down and I was like, man, have I ever been faced with a trolley problem?
Yeah, have you? I'm curious.
Yeah. The answer to that question is, not on the order of that situation.
Not like Eye in the Sky.
Not like Eye in the Sky, or not necessarily in the order of, somebody living in Nazi Germany who, is hiding Jews and different things. No. Yeah. But I have been faced with the problem of, somebody asked me a question and maybe I don't want to hurt their feelings,
right.
you know?
Do
And
I
so,
look fat?
and yeah, you know, your wife, your dear, sweet, loving wife, comes to you and says, "Does this make me look fat?" And then you're just like, "Oh,
You're like, honey, we're wrestling with trolley problems here.
Yeah. This is a trolley problem. I wish the trolley would just come and run me over."
I'll pull the switch, whatever it takes.
I'll kill myself. But yeah, like, so if you're saying that's a trolley problem, then I would say yes, we do face these problems all the time.
Yeah, certainly on that level.
On certain level.
But I think the thing I want to wrestle with is these really hard, real trolley problems. Like Eye in the Sky is a good one. I've heard of examples. I think it was with Hurricane Katrina where a hospital lost power and they had to make triage decisions.
Yeah.
That's a tough thing. It was a Radiolab episode called Playing God, if anybody wants to listen to that.
Yeah,
very,
really
very good episode. Make you think, make you wrestle. So the thing is obviously philosophers have been wrestling with this a long time. So there's nothing in one sense that we're going to add new to this conversation. Yeah. But it still doesn't mean that I don't want to wrestle with it.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that I have a really firm solution to how to navigate these things, but I do think there is something the Christian worldview can bring to the table, and maybe we'll talk about that a little bit. But it seems better, first of all, to maybe juxtapose how does the secular world, how does the non-Christian worldview, is there a difference between how they wrestle with it and how we wrestle with it?
Absolutely.
And how so?
Well,
in your mind.
In my mind. Okay, so let's set this up for a minute. We're both faced with two separate realities, right? Of course, as Christians, we are faced with the reality of the Bible. What the Bible says our reality is, right? Mm-hmm. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay. People that don't prescribe to the Bible, they're faced with a reality, this sort of what they deem to be scientific or evolutionary sort of mindset,
sure.
Right? There's just what we see is what we have. Chances are we developed out of gook, and we're just kind of trying to figure out everything as we go along.
Right.
And so the basis for trolley problems for a Christian is sin.
Yeah.
Would that be fair
I think
to say?
That's absolutely right. Because if you back up for a second, when I think about the trolley problem wouldn't be an issue if when it hit the people, it tickled.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Ooh.
Yeah, like, ooh, or make bubbles pop out. Like colorful bubble. No, why it's a problem is because people die.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
Dying is not good.
It's not good. It's bad.
And that's there because of sin.
Yeah. And that's what a Christian would say.
That's what a Christian would say.
Now, and someone who's not a Christian would say, okay, trolley problems exist because of realities that cause deprivation. So, for instance, you have a young person versus an old person. Mm-hmm. That there's a disparity between that, right? Mm-hmm. Or birth defects. Somebody's born with a particular type of birth defects. You mentioned natural disasters. There are certain
got a bad roll of the DNA dice.
Bad roll of the DNA dice. There's some people. Let's even talk about professions. Mm. There's some people who say that there's certain professions that are just more valuable to society, and other professions are not, and so we should preference these sorts of people. Wealth has to do with that. Some people will go as far as to say ethnicity. I mean, you could go on, but we're faced with all of these realities, and then we're faced with these problems in which we need a solution. Like, we need a way to think through how could we kind of cookie cutter all of these scenarios.
Well, every human being in that situation is faced with the choice.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
Because to do nothing, in the case of Eye in the Sky, is to tacitly approve of a man going up and blowing others.
Yeah, I would agree.
So Christian or non-Christian, they face the same kind of scenarios.
Absolutely.
But are you saying that the secular-minded person, they're facing the same situation, but they approach it with a different mindset. I mean, where is the difference here?
Well, the difference is, the ethical system. Now,
Yeah.
I think the most prevailing ethical system that's applied to, in a naturalistic world, totally devoid of God, the worldview is utilitarianism.
Yeah, okay.
And, utilitarianism, popularized by John Stuart Mills and Jeremy Bentham, says that, it's the greatest pleasure for the greatest amount of people. So to do that which is good, or an act of good, is to do whatever advances that principle. That's to maximize the pleasure and happiness for for the greatest majority of people. That's a good action.
Sure.
Any action that prevents the happiness or pleasure for the vast amount of people, that's a bad action.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, as a clean-cut, consistent view of that, right?
Yeah.
That's how it would work.
That's how it works.
Because they would certainly I mean, when you think of, when I listen to different utilitarians talk about this, I mean, they've certainly recognized the messiness of everything.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And they definitely bring different values to the table.
Absolutely.
Which would flavor and shade really which direction you go. Because I've heard people handle trolley problems both ways. I've seen some say, take out the brother. Nope, take out the four. So how in the world do we... the thing I wrestle with in my mind, I just keep coming back to, is there a way to navigate this in a consistent, across the board, right course of action kind of way?
It's interesting.
I mean, does it exist?
Well, let's go back. Let me ask you this question before we even tackle that. Why would you want it to be that way?
And what do you mean? Like,
why would you want it to be... Why would you want an ethical system that works in every situation?
Well, I want it to be... For myself...
Yeah.
Because I think multiple reasons. I have a sense that when faced with a tough decision, I want to chart the path that is most just right. Just that, not only for conscience sake, but for the sake of some kind of sense of greater good. Like, there is I want to do the right thing. That of course is presupposing that there is
a right thing.
Right thing absolutely. To do. And I believe there is.
Okay.
There's got to be, right?
Yeah, I agree with you, but I mean, I guess for our listeners, that's the crux of our argument.
Well, it is
as Christians.
I mean, let's face it. If we're living in a relativistic world, where preferences are rooted merely in the whims of DNA,
exactly.
To
me, the trolley car problem is a uniquely Christian problem because underneath, if I didn't have to worry about my ethical decisions being judged by a holy God, then is there really a way for me to make a decision that I can deem wrong?
Right. I mean, at that point, it'd only be what a person has adopted as the acceptable standard for what they view as pragmatically good on the whole.
Absolutely.
Which is, I mean, that's entirely... I mean, in many ways, just subjective. Now, some people,
totally
I know, like somebody like a Sam Harris is going to say, no. It is objectively bad, scientifically, to throw battery acid on a woman's face. Well, you still cannot help but smuggle in notions of this is human flourishing. You no matter what, you can't. I want to say yes, of course that's bad.
Right.
But in a world without any objective morals transcendentally, it really just comes down to, well, our brains have been wired and fashioned in such a way that we see that and we cringe and we recoil and we say, my preference is not to do that to somebody. A praying mantis who mates and eats the mate's head has no such feelings.
No, and I don't exactly see how the argument is that science says it's objectively bad. All science tells me is that the compounds in battery acid will corrode the flesh of somebody. I don't see how science can tell me that's bad.
Right, so you're saying that is ought.
Yeah, it's the classic is ought. I mean, I sometimes I tell my students, science can tell me that water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit, but it can't tell me whether or not it's wrong to boil a baby in water. I mean, how could it possibly tell me that?
Right. So obviously a person could spiral off now, and because a sophisticated utilitarian will listen to us and go, yeah, but okay, fair enough,
Right.
because we're not getting into the weeds on that side. I still would submit that at the end of the day, if there is no God, and this is just a universe crafted from chaos and chance, that it really does come down to preferences, and a brain can come up with all kinds of different preferences. So choose your preference, I'll choose mine, have a nice day.
Have a nice day.
You know what I mean? Some people like to have their neighbors over for dinner, and some people like to have their neighbors for dinner. Both are based on feelings.
You know, so it's a feeling.
Right?
That's really silence of the night laughing. What are you doing tonight?
But
I'm having a friend over
so
for
bringing
dinner.
it back, you said, so why do you feel the conundrum? I feel the conundrum because I feel like inside of me there is a decision that's better than A is better than B, or B is better than A.
Yeah,
I mean, do you feel that?
I
Do you
feel
believe
that. Yeah, I feel that. And maybe this is a part. This is when we probably need to start fleshing out how maybe somebody who doesn't have the Christian worldview versus somebody who does have a Christian worldview would have this inward compulsion. There's a sense in which I believe in good and bad decisions. I believe that there's decisions that I make that are wise and unwise. And I believe that that's pretty universal. Like, there's a decision that's better than another. But whenever we start having these conversations about a decision being better than the other, there are several logical questions. Like, for instance, do I have all the facts? Am I in possession of all the facts?
That's important.
Do I have biases? Or do I have anything that would preclude me from making the right decision? In absence of all of that, though, because sometimes you have to make decisions in split seconds, which that's how a trolley car problem usually manifests itself. Like, you only have 10 seconds to make this decision. I might know my brother, but if my brother is a particularly awful person, I might willingly want him to get run over. Versus if yeah, exactly. Or, if I think my brother is a particularly awesome person, I might say no. I don't care what those people are. All of them need to perish.
Sure.
And so, let's do this. Let's talk about for a moment why for us as Christians trolley car problems are such so hard.
I think when I think about this, I think there's multiple levels, but I think at the highest level, and we talked about a little bit before, I sin in its very essence seems to be this, I don't know what you want to, what's the word I'm looking? I don't want to say force or entity or anything like that. Let me just say this. Sin creates a space in the reality of God's world that is inherently conundrum creating or chaotic. Or that which is not God. It's like the antithesis of God. So if he's all good, all just, life, the antithesis is going to create the opposite. And so it seems like if soon as sin enters the picture, it creates these, like the trolley problem situation. Why does, with Eye in the Sky, why does that exist? Because there's this evil man who wants to blow people up. If there wasn't an evil man who didn't want to blow people up, problem solved.
Exactly.
But there is an evil man who wants to blow people up. Bad. Right? That's sin. So that creates this, and then if you combine with that, we have certain limitations. We're finite. You couldn't just have a Navy SEAL pop up and shoot him in the head. Teleport him in there. Limitation.
Like a portal. A portal opens up, a
Yeah.
gun comes out with a scope, and
Because a lot of these you could solve.
absolutely.
If you just had enough, as it were, technology.
Yeah.
You know, or enough powerful resources. But to get back to the question, it seems to me that sin is fundamentally conundrum creating. So long as we live in this world, as we are, I cannot see how we can avoid these.
No, and I would say this. What makes trolley problems particularly worrisome is, you know, from, I think year in, year out, we see, trolley problems becoming even more technical, more difficult, and more obscure, to where I think you and I even talked about this. With the advent of self-driving cars, the decision to whether or not to avoid a bus filled with children and just nail an individual is not going to be made by the individual,
right.
but it's going to be made by a bunch of computer software engineers,
right,
who don't know you and who don't know the situation, who doesn't live in your town, maybe doesn't,
no, right,
just has no clue about the situation at all, or
a decision has to be made.
A decision has to be made.
So where are we going to land and why?
And where are we going to land and why? It might land with the driver. Like if the highest ethic is protect the driver,
right.
or the highest ethic is to protect little children or whatever.
So I don't think we can escape that. This is value-laden. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Everybody would agree this is a value-laden decision.
Absolutely.
So how do we, and this is where I just want to talk, I don't know that I have a hard and fast solution to this. So I'm just genuinely curious to wrestle with you about this.
Okay.
How do we begin to think about choosing value A over value B? Where do we go with this?
Well, we had talked about let's put some trolley car problems out on the table, because we need to get a scope of what we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, we've talked about the eye in the sky. Yeah. So you have this guy who's a murderer in a sense, and then this innocent girl. Decision has to be made. So that's one. Yep. That's one dynamic.
Yeah, sacrifice the one for the many. Yes. That's the basic principle.
Yeah. And then you have another situation of, Nazi Germany, you're hiding Jews, they came to your door and they said, hey, okay, either you lie to protect life, or you tell the truth and you lose the ability to protect life.
Yeah, more than likely the Jews die.
More than likely to die. And you die for
more
keeping
than likely,
it. Yeah, everybody dies.
Yeah, everybody dies.
Then you have the issue of triage.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you have both people needing help. You have finite resources. You can only keep one person alive. Who do you do that? Yeah. Right? That's one.
Yeah.
And then probably the last one we could throw in for variety purposes is, you mentioned the Hebrew midwives, which is sort of that situation, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, a situation happened in the book of Exodus where pretty much a death sentence was levied against all the male children in Israel. And these group of Hebrew midwives defied the order of the Pharaoh, and said essentially that, listen, the I love the phrasing. The women of the Hebrews are lively, they
right.
they give birth before we arrive, and we just aren't able to, and then they hide the children, and we aren't able to execute this order.
Yeah.
So
well, see, and that's where I'm not sure you and I are on the same page on this.
We're not on the same page.
Okay, so here's what we got to do. We got to read the passage because here's what's at stake with this passage. I say it was a genuine ethical conundrum, like a trolley problem, and they chose a certain course of action that God was pleased with. That meant that they did something that we would normally call sinful. So let's read the passage.
Okay. Yeah.
And then let's wrestle with it, because I'm curious why you wouldn't agree.
All right.
In Exodus 1:16 it says, "When you serve as midwife to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a son, you shall kill him. But if it is a daughter, she shall live." But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but let the male children live. So the king of Egypt called the midwives and said to them, "Why have you done this? And let the male children live." The midwives said to Pharaoh, "Because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them." So God dealt well with the midwives,
right,
and the people multiplied and grew very strong. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now hold on. Do you
just read it, you don't see it?
well, would you agree that the narrator, that the way he describes their actions, he sees it as the right, they chose A and that was the right thing to do over B?
Yes.
And was choice A include deceitfulness, if not a lie?
No.
Okay, see, that's where I think we disagree.
Yeah.
Why?
Okay, so here, we've just read the narrative.
Yeah.
I agree with your basic premise that the narrator definitely indicates that they were blessed.
Yeah.
And
they feared God.
They feared God. God gave them children of their own.
We agreed they chose correctly.
They chose correctly.
Okay.
Okay. But remember what the original action is. The reason why I would say this isn't a true trolley cart problem or issue is because the action that they weren't given an immediate alternate action or another competing sort of good. Because remember, we talked about a trolley cart problem that there are two goods that are in conflict with one another. You have to choose one over the other. The only good here is that they save the children. What's the other good?
Well, I see it as they have a choice. They can either not deceive, which is a good.
They didn't deceive because he wasn't there. The deception came afterwards when they came to him and says, listen, we caught you already doing this.
Yeah. Well, what's taking place? Well, they disobeyed the king. He said, kill them. Right. So they disobeyed. And their excuse was a lie.
We don't know if that's a lie.
But it
could be the case that they're vigorous.
It's surely a fabrication.
Oh my goodness. I can only go by what the narrative says. The narrative does not, in my opinion, present a true trolley cart problem. Because there's no two equally competing and valuable ethical choices before them. There's only one. Don't kill the child. Protect the child's life. What's the other one? What's the other side of that coin? So, okay, for instance.
To not lie. That's the good.
No, okay. So, let's take the case of the Nazi, which I think would be the closest parallel.
That's a really close parallel.
Yeah. In that moment, if a Nazi comes to your door and says, hey, are there Jews in your house? In that moment, right, you're faced between those two decisions.
Right. You either lie to protect life, which is a good.
Which is a good.
Or you don't lie, which is a good.
Which is a good. The Hebrew midwives in this narrative don't have such a choice because one came profoundly after the other. It's not like, they protected the life and then they were asked a question to which they answered. So to me, it's not like their decision in that moment to talk to the king would have impacted what they already did because the action's already done.
But wouldn't it be... I'm sure there was births happening all the time, so I would think this was still a live issue, and their lying would keep the guards from. If they told, let's say they did tell after the fact, they told these people, yeah, we kept them alive. What would have happened? I mean, what would have happened to those midwives and the babies? Where are they at?
Now, see. Here's where, and I was going to wait until we get to solutions, but here's where I think they did the same thing that Jesus did.
Okay.
And maybe we could wait a little bit to discuss that, but...
Okay, because I struggle because, here's the thing.
Yeah.
Let's assume for the sake of argument that the good that they chose was to deceive.
I would argue, but deception isn't on the table.
It can't be in your mind.
Well, not in my mind. The narrative doesn't tell me that they deceived. The narrative tells me two things.
Well, they clearly created the impression that the babies already came out, we didn't kill them.
But suppose that is the truth.
But suppose it isn't. It works both ways.
But here's the narrative only tells me two things.
Yeah.
If anything, I would say this falls under civil disobedience, which is permissible in Scripture.
Okay.
I can, if a government is telling me to do something contrary to what the Bible says, I am morally obligated not to do it by Scripture. So that falls under the civil.
Well, let's imagine this. Let's imagine this. Let's imagine the Egyptian taskmaster shows up.
Okay.
And he says, what'd you do with these kids? Well, these Hebrew, they're vigorous, right? And he's like, okay, so can you show me where the babies are at? Or what if he asked this? Did you just tell me something that you would think would help solve this problem? In other words, did you all along, Hebrew midwives, plan on keeping those babies alive? What would you do in that point?
Well, now you're asking me to answer a question I prefer to wait to answer. But if you want to answer this now, here's what I'll say.
Okay.
Here's what I'll say.
Okay.
What they did, and what I believe Jesus did in Matthew 22, the story of the render to Caesar what's unto Caesar. Like, obviously they were trying to trap him. So here's what I'll do. I see Jesus and the Hebrew midwives affirming two things at different times. Okay? So Jesus' example is much easier. Mm-hmm. They wanted him to choose one over the other. Mm-hmm. It's good to support the king, and it's good to support God. So he says, okay, here you have two goods. I am not going to choose one good over the other because both of them are equally valid. Mm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to affirm both, but make sure I make them understand that it's the God is the one that's more supreme, but I'm going to affirm both goods, right? Mm-hmm. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar, and to God the things that are God, right? So he takes these two things that are juxtaposed to one. I mean, sort of they're trying to say
it's supposed to be horns of a dilemma, right?
Yeah, and he puts them together. I think what the Hebrew midwives did was the same thing. They protected life, and then remember they went to them and they brought him before Pharaoh, and they're thinking the whole time like, "What are we going to say? Well, we can't lie. Let's just tell them the truth, or a portion of the truth, which is these women are vigorous." Like, by the time we get there, they're already the baby's already born.
I mean, maybe you're right. I guess I can't back you in a quarterback. I'm sorry. I just find that is a very convenient little fact. Like, all of the Hebrews are vigorous, and just babies are flying out like missiles. You know what I mean?
They might be.
Yeah, they just flew and they went over to Goshen just like that.
But I mean, that's what. There's nothing in the narrative that would warrant me saying that, hey, they lied. And I think what's affirmed, if anything, is that they did not obey a wicked, godless order.
That's undeniable.
Yeah.
That they clearly weighted towards preserving life.
Yeah. So okay. So let me ask you a question because I'm curious of this. Mm-hmm. What is the trolley problem in your mind? Like, what is the issue that you think, and then what is the morally compromised thing that they did?
Right. I guess I think of it as, right, the trolley problem, as we've kind of said already, is, on the one hand, I don't want babies to die.
Right.
I'm not going to do that. Yeah. Period. I die before I have babies die. That's what's going to happen. Right. The other is, I'm also told not to lie. Mm-hmm. So therein is the simple conundrum. Let's just say for the sake of argument that Hebrew women weren't that vigorous. Okay? And I know that. And I start to give this line. And then the guard is like, do you think I'm stupid? You know? I've seen a few Hebrews give babies, and actually they take a long time. Let's just say he says that. So tell me the truth. At that point, I can either continue to hold to my story,
right,
and just go, nah, I'm gonna just, you don't deserve the truth because you're looking to kill people, and I'm willing to preserve life, or I'm willing to divulge and tell the truth, which is another kind of good.
So wait a minute, you don't believe a liar deserves the truth?
I think in a situation like that, with like Rahab and the spies, I say if someone is in a sense forfeited their right. There's two ways we can go about this.
Okay.
One is to go, a person in that kind of situation who's bent on committing horrible atrocities has lost the right for me to help them in any way. And that would involve deceiving. That's one possible way you could go. The other way you could go is to say, God understands that there are trolley problems in the sinful world.
Right.
And you do have to choose. So choose the weightier matters of the law. The weightier matter would be keep preserving life over telling the truth. Therefore, that action was blessed, even though it wasn't ideally good.
Okay, so I take completely the opposite.
Yeah.
This is so funny. So I actually believe that, okay, when I read, let's say, the Hall of Faith.
Okay.
When I read the Hall of Faith,
Yeah.
I don't think Abraham is in the Hall of Faith because he lied that Sarah was his sister.
Well, yeah, that was a pretty scoundrelly kind of thing. Right?
I don't think guys like Samson is in the Hall of Faith for, shacking up with prostitutes or marrying morally questionable women.
Fair enough.
Okay? I don't believe that.
Yeah.
I think they're in there in spite of that.
Sure.
But not because of that.
Absolutely.
So if that's the case, I would argue that the Hebrew midwives were blessed not because they might have told an untruth, which I don't think it's an untruth. I actually think that the Hebrew women were lying.
Very vigorous.
Well, because, in Hebrew narrative, we see that God is responsible for either making a woman barren or giving her a bunch of children. Look at Leah, right? She was more favored over Rachel. So the Bible says that God opened up her womb and she was kind of pumping those kids out, right? So I believe from a biblical standpoint, I believe the Hebrew women were vigorous. I mean, they were in bondage. God knew that he was going to bring them out. God knew that he would need a ton of people. So, hey, God was just like allowing these women to just...
So just to put our cards on the table, do
Yeah.
you see both of those issues I sketched out as not being at all viable?
No, of course I view them as viable.
So you could do one of those options with a clear conscience?
I would say, okay, now we're talking about when I hear you say viability, I'm thinking in the realm of possibility.
And okay. Let me make it a stronger thing then. Not just the realm of possibility, but an appropriate possibility. Like you have to choose A or B.
Let me say this: I don't know of a scenario of God bless in Scripture where God blesses a sin. And generally, anytime God legislates something that we might be like, "Are you kidding me? Like, why are you legislating divorce?" It's really not him legislating divorce as much as him providing a provision to protect the woman.
So I guess that does okay.
So that's where and listen, I don't have this perfectly figured out. I think every time I open my Bible and I read, I'm trying to discern the logic of heaven.
Oh, sure.
But I mean,
would it though provide? Let's just say for the sake of art, because if let's say we go your direction.
I feel very uncomfortable saying my direction.
I'm just saying conceptually, right?
Okay, yeah.
Conceptually, the direction that you're talking about. Well, let me do it from mine because I think it'll paint the picture. If option one, like somebody who's bloodthirsty, has forfeited their right for the truth, or
can somebody actually do that though? Like, I mean, maybe that's where I'm struggling.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I guess I just kind of, in my mind, if someone is that bent on destruction, I'm not going to aid them in any way. In fact, I'm going to deter them. And I can't help but think, I have a choice.
All
I can either be quiet and say nothing, and then the cruel person kills me or tortures me.
Right.
All right. Or I can tell them the truth, and then they maybe kill me and kill the other people. Or I can just flat out lie to them and go for it, or try to deceive them. Oh, in your way, they were vigorous.
They were vigorous, which I still. Well,
if that's true,
you're right. Yeah.
If that's true, and that's an accurate logic of heaven, as it were, in this sinful world, would you then concede that we have a window, at least a crack in the door, in how to solve trolley problems?
I mean, I'm sorry I'm laughing because I can hear my wife listening to this. Like, I can't believe he's saying vigorous woman. I'm sorry, honey.
Would it crack the door and provide we now have a principle for how to think about these things?
Listen. Again, I'm trying to find a scenario. I'm trying to think through a biblical scenario where dishonesty is commended. Now, Of course, we haven't gotten into the whole discussion about just war theory. Maybe we could leave that off.
Sure.
And there's multiple examples in warfare of the Lord directing. I mean, we think of Gideon.
Oh, yeah.
You know, put the lights up and then bang really loud.
Yeah, certainly deception. But yeah.
But even then, notice the deception doesn't necessarily lie with the man, but the deception lies with what the others think and perceive. So it's not like they tell them, we have 10,000 men with us.
Isn't that the idea of deception? Like, oh, your Hebrew women are vigorous. Oh, yeah.
Well, I would say there's a deception in which you purposely try to make someone think a particular way. Yeah. And then there's a deception in which you could create a situation where people on their own, because of their own sinfulness, would think a particular way.
Okay.
So I would kind of parse that out.
Okay. Yeah, there is a parsing out. Okay, I'll grant that. Okay, because what this does is it creates a fork in the road. Because if the principle I'm saying is right, I would go, oh, hey, we have at least an instance or two where we get some of the logic of heaven, as it were. Where if your path is correct, I'm going to go, ooh, well, how do we navigate? How do we navigate eye in the sky? Because are you going to kill the innocent little girl?
Would I?
Yeah.
I mean,
how do you avoid that?
Here's the deal.
You have to somebody's dying.
Somebody's going to die, right?
Yeah.
And my thing is, okay, why couldn't they take the drone, wait until he comes out, and while he's driving, just ram the drone into his car?
Yeah, and obviously, yeah, they didn't.
I mean,
So you're just saying is your principle? I'm not going to allow myself to be really stuck in a trolley.
My principle is, I believe in the principle that God always makes a way of escape for his people, and we need to figure out what that escape is. So
you're saying I will never be forced to make a sinful decision?
No, because there has to be, in my mind, there has to be another way. I think there's certain problems. Like, obviously, you've heard of situations where somebody says, okay, you're caught in a situation, again, wartime, it's wickedness and all of that stuff takes over, and somebody says, we're going to kill one of your children, choose one. I mean, some people say, of course, I'll just pick one because I want one of my children to live. But then I'm like, is life worth living, actually, with that knowledge?
I think at that point, I mean, I wouldn't do this, but you give him the middle finger, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'll give him two. I have two of them.
It's like, no. We're all going.
We're all going. Yeah. We're all going to die.
Because some things are worse than death.
Exactly.
Well, we talked about this.
Yeah, I was just going to say, tell them about the... Okay. I don't know if it's... Do you think it's appropriate?
I think it's probably appropriate.
All right.
Christopher Hitchens, one time, it was a debate with a Christian. And he was creating these ethical dilemmas, and he was asking. It was, I think, during the Q&A, and he was asking someone, look, sometimes you just have to choose. Let's imagine that you have to either brutally rape a person or let all of humanity die. He's like, well, you've got to do the rape. You have to, and that's where you go. I think as a Christian, you have to say, there are some things worse than death.
Exactly.
There are some things worse than death.
Yeah.
Death isn't the end.
And that's the emphasis of what I call passive martyrdom, right? So, I've heard people all the time say, well, what's the difference between Christians and Muslims with martyrdom? Well, I'm like, when I see a suicide bomber dying for his faith, right? That's active martyrdom. Like, he's actually taking his life and purposefully destroying life. Christian martyrdom is different. Christian martyrdom is passive. In other words, if they put a gun to my head and say, deny your faith, I'm going to say no, realizing, just as you said, there's some things worse than death. And the thing that's worse than death is denying your Lord. So, I mean, under that scenario, I would say there's a profound difference. One's actively using your body to kill other people or to advance your faith, and the other one is passively saying, no, I'm not going to deny my Lord, and I'm not going to kill you, because this isn't maybe a war situation, or maybe, I don't know, depending on...
So let me advance to this. God obviously interacts with the sinful world.
Absolutely.
And so is it possible for us to glean insight from the way he's handled these things?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so then
Yeah.
my question would be, when you think of the law,
Mm-hmm.
and when I think of the law in the Old Testament, it seems to me that God did accommodate. In other words, we tend to look at the law and go, man, why didn't he just, back then, right out of the gate, just forbid slavery?
Mm-hmm.
Why did he allow a certificate of divorce for these really petty men? Because God hates divorce. We know that. And he didn't design it that way. But he did, in one sense, accommodate it. Or when they went into the promised land, I don't know, why not have a law that you adopt the little Amalekite child? No, everything dies.
Yeah.
Everything gets killed. So, I don't know. Let me just stop there. What is your? There's a lot of things there. What's your reaction?
This is when we cut. It's been nice talking to all of you.
It's been fun.
It's been fun. I think a couple of things. I think number one, there is an assumption among human beings that there is a correct way to answer this question, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's also, I think, a good assumption that whatever answer we provide will be insufficient for some. It'll be sufficient for some, insufficient for some.
Sure.
Right?
Can't deny.
Can't deny. So whatever answer I give briefly, it's going to be insufficient for some, and then someone's like, oh, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Sure.
I think to understand all of those scenarios, you have to understand what God did, I think, in the days of Noah.
Okay.
In destroying the earth.
Okay.
And the Lord really saying, listen, I did that. I mean, the whole world was so wrapped up in sin. I believe the flood. Throw my hands on there. So now, I think how he deals with people is with an eye to the final, the final reckoning.
Yeah.
In
the end game.
In the end game. And I think when I see an issue like God making provisions for divorce, right? As much as he hates divorce, I see grace. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, I think I know what you're going to say.
I see profound grace, right?
All right, so explain why, because obviously people are going, what?
Oh, well, the profound grace there is that these women would be in an abusive situation and almost kicked to the curb, and no man would want them, right? Because these men are still going to do what they want to do, right? So God is saying, no, give her a bill of divorcement, so at least now she's free to sort of go back to her home, maybe be underneath the auspice of her father. This man can't go back and remarry this woman after he's done with this other woman, so you have these perpetual. Sure. So it's all to protect the woman. I could imagine the scenario with a little cute Amalekite child who, is growing up and is suffering much indignities because his family, were
Sir,
awful.
Are you saying then that there's a balance of implications?
Yeah. Like, why do we have to assume that the worst scenario is true in all those situations?
But are we saying that the omnipotent God is dealing with a balance of implications?
I mean, if he is omnipotent and omniscient, then yeah.
Okay. See, I think that's significant.
Yeah.
If I'm treading where I don't quite know where I'm going.
Uh-oh.
So
you need some skates?
No, I'm just saying with all of this. Okay, so this is called thinking out loud, and I would say this is a good point to pause and say, podcast rule number 212 is when somebody's wrestling through an issue, go ahead and let the rabbit trails happen without hanging them, because we're just following the rabbit trails to kind of feel things out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Don't hang the guy who's just trying to figure things out. All right? Yeah. Just because you say something doesn't mean you believe it.
Yeah.
So, if God accommodates sin because of the nature of man, and man aren't puppets. He made us not puppets. He's completely sovereign.
Yeah.
But somehow we're not puppets.
Yeah.
And he works through secondary causes. And those have real implications that play out in time history. So if the creator of the universe accommodated things and weighed implications, then surely when we face these trolley issues, we have to weigh implications and make a judgment call. Now, we're trying to find the mind of Christ in these things, and that's a hard...
We're trying to find the logic of heaven, right? Because we know that one exists.
Yeah. Now, the challenge is would you have allowed for a certificate of divorce? That's when you go, well, I mean, I don't know. I tend to want to sit here and go, well, why not just really tell people, no, you got to do it this way?
Right.
Well, a certain people at a certain time with a certain heart, no, they're not going to do that. Well, change their hearts. Well, you can't demand grace.
Yeah.
So,
that's the function of grace. I mean, I know, I could imagine somebody sitting down there and say, this is bizarre. Mm-hmm. This is bizarre. Mm-hmm. Like, if God is so all powerful, mm-hmm. right? Why doesn't he change hearts? Mm-hmm. And again, this goes back to the profound sort of misunderstanding of omnipotence, right? Mm-hmm. Omnipotence doesn't mean that God can do anything he wants, or necessarily that he will do everything. That's not what omnipotent means.
Sure.
Like, God cannot create a rock too big for him to lift.
Right.
I mean, it's a misunderstanding.
Now, some Lutherans would disagree because they just have this profound sense of mystery.
That's
you go, well, okay, but that just seems, if it's a logical contradiction, God
can't do it.
God can't do
it. God can't.
Right.
So having said that, omnipotent means, and I have to take pause and just say thank you, R.C. Sproul. He's gone now, but this is his contribution to my theology.
Yeah.
And when he talks about omnipotence, he said all it means is that God is in complete control of his creation, mm-hmm. and that because he's in complete control of his creation, he can choose to do whatever he wants to do. Mm-hmm. And when you look at omnipotence from that standpoint, like, okay, well, God doesn't choose in this instance to change hearts. He's choose to use this method.
He can leave people exactly where they're at, doing exactly what they want.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And it could be the most perfect thing possible.
And beyond that,
mm-hmm.
he's willing to institute laws that accommodate that in some sense. Like, he's legislating the mess.
Yeah.
As a mess.
And here's the big thing. Can God allow perfection of a situation this side of eternity? And the answer to that question is no. I mean...
Say the question again.
Okay. Can God allow perfection mm-hmm. of a situation with imperfect things this side of heaven?
Right, I see what you're saying. Right.
Yeah. And the answer to that question is...
Yeah. Right,
no, I mean, he could in heaven.
Not without not without that twinkling of an eye, right?
Not without complete transformation.
Right.
Yeah. That verse that you quoted, we should not be, what? How does it start? Like, we should not all be changed. We should all be changed in the moment and twinkling of an eye.
Yeah.
Somebody suggested that they put that above, but somebody suggested that you should put that on top of a nursery.
I like it.
Yeah.
That's good. There's a plaque for you.
Yeah, there's a plaque for you.
So I don't know quite how to tie this up other than to say, it seems to me that if a part of the pursuit of wisdom mm-hmm. is to try to, I think there's an avenue to take, and maybe people have written and thought deeply about this and I'm just not aware of it, but to really look at how God has handled these things.
Yeah.
And see if you can draw principles from that. Like, sometimes he legislates the mess as the mess.
Yes.
And sometimes it seems to me that when faced with a tough decision with the midwives, he blesses those who, okay, let's say they didn't lie. Well, they certainly tried to massage the situation. Right? And that's a good thing.
Yeah. I would say that I would grant you that. I said at the very least, I don't think it was an out and out lie. I think there's good reasons to believe that the Hebrew women were just having a bunch of kids, and they, I know people that only are in labor for 15 minutes. Like, they get in labor and the baby's out.
Well, that'd be nice.
Yeah, 15, 30 minutes max.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could see my wife signing up for that. 15 minutes? Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, look, when I try to wrap my head around all these things, how do we? Okay, what are we going to do to tie this up? Because we are saying that A, trolley problems are real.
Yeah.
B, problems, there is a better course of action than another.
Yes.
I think in many situations.
Yeah.
In Eye in the Sky, you got to make a decision. Which way is it better? You're maybe saying, C, let's dig deeper and look for the way out. Maybe it isn't. Maybe there are no real trolley problems where you have to choose a course of sin. That's something to think about more. Maybe that'd be a good homework. Is there always a way out? I mean, God can make a way out.
Oh yeah.
He can make a way out.
Yeah.
But is there always a way out? I don't know. Maybe so. And then maybe D is God has interacted with sin. There are times when he has simply said, all of this has to be destroyed. And that's a fair course of action.
And I, just to kind of piggyback on that, the assumption with all trolley car problems is that I agree. There's a decision that could be made that's the best decision or a better decision. Mm-hmm. But I also think that since there is a possibility for two groups of people to say that save the girl or let a whole bunch of people die or kill the girl and save a whole bunch of people, like there's both sides of that equation. And so for us on this side of eternity, no matter what decision we make, it's not a good decision to make. Like, can we at least...
We'll flip it.
Yeah.
Can we say that since the people making the decision for Eye in the Sky are right to wrestle with it,
right?
But is it really an issue of, since they're not the culprits of evil,
right?
Is there a sense in which both ways, there is a sense in which both ways could be right? I mean, how does that resonate with you?
No, it's.
I mean, I'm not responsible for another evil person.
Yeah.
Now you go, but it's your responsibility to stop him if you can.
Yeah.
Well, but there are implications that in the same way that God could stop all evil right now. I could snap my fingers. It's done.
Yeah.
God could do that. But he doesn't for other reasons.
I could see, I mean, there's something in me that says that wants to say no. I mean, obviously I'm not just saying no to be contrarian, but I'm trying to think of, obviously there's the issue of priority. Mm-hmm. What decision is going to take high priority?
Right.
The
greater good, in a sense.
Or we could argue to say the greater good. I don't necessarily believe in a situation like that there can be a greater good. Mm-hmm. That's why I take the negative approach and say both are wrong, because it's if you kill the little girl, right, you're taking away a life that was not culpable for the sin being perpetrated. Right. If we saved the little girl but killed a whole bunch of other people, then we could say, all right, that's not good. Yeah. So that's why I walk away from this saying there's really no good decision. There's two poor decisions, and you just kind of pick one.
Right. And that's where you tend to think, and that's where there is a sense in which the utilitarianism kind of comes in, because you still kind of go, well, let's aim for the greatest preservation of good. Is that right?
I mean, utilitarianism in that situation is based on, first of all, what's going to be good for the greatest amount of people.
Sure,
right?
Which would be not, let's say, 100 people dying from the explosion.
My biggest problem with utilitarianism is there's no metrics to determine the maximum amount of good. Like, it's fine to say maximum amount of good, maximum amount of pleasure, but there's no metrics. And by the way... Because
of the echo domino effect of the things.
Because of the echo domino effect.
But locally considered, I still want to say, you can't have the 100 die. But to your point, on one of your previous points is, but we aren't killing the other 100. We aren't actively doing that. And we don't know that it'll happen.
And we don't know that. But even beyond that, who's to say that the grief of those 100 people's family is more, just because there's more numbers, would be more than this little girl.
Right.
And
we can't calculate.
We can't calculate that. So I think based on that, why do we even sneak that into... We're making an assumption that the grief of 100 people would be more because it's more people than the grief of this little girl's family.
Well, you know what I think we ought to do?
What?
I think we ought to appeal to listeners to weigh in.
Yeah.
Springboard again in the future.
Yeah.
And talk about this more. And especially because I think we can get down to more policy level issues.
Oh yeah, we
right?
still
like
gotta talk about
something
policy.
I would like to raise, but we're going kind of long here, is the idea of equality of opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
Every system of government wrestles with the idea of equality of opportunity, and they're trying to navigate resource problems, natural disaster problems, sinful people problems.
Right.
You know, people without education, people with physical disabilities. They're all trying to navigate with their policies which way should we go and why.
Yeah.
And I think there's quite a bit we can say there as Christians. But I think it has to be for another day.
Yeah, I think it has to be for another day.
But what we still have to explain is our yes or no.
I guess so.
Okay, so why did you say no? Why did you say Ness?
Ness. Well, I said no because it's almost a given that we've, you know, as a society, we've become sort of more. Okay, here's why I said no.
Okay.
I said no because I don't think we've become more sinful as a society. Like, you know, from an ethical standpoint.
Like if you were to put it in a balance,
yeah,
sin is sin.
sin is
all
sin.
over.
Yeah, and then it's just as potent, I think, in every generation. We might say it's more open and more visible.
It is flagrant.
But it's pretty flagrant. What I would see there is more just a stylistic change than anything else. Like, I mean, I don't know if stylistic is moral. But
I think that's a good way to put it, because are there people who take... I want to say yes, because I do see people who take this stylistic approach and be crass, like a Howard Stern. Right?
Yeah.
Right? Here is a very, very popular radio voice who is not like the 50s broadcaster. He's crass and openly so. And so there's an element, I want to say that does go with that kind of decline, that lack of formal, that lack of sanctity, that lack of dignity, as it were, even the idea of the way people dress so casually. But at the same token, there's nothing at all wrong about dressing casually.
That's
And there's nothing at all wrong about just speaking very plainly.
Yeah.
You know, kind of an earthy way of speaking, you know?
Yeah.
You know, blue collar, let's say.
Trumpian.
So, if I had to answer, I think I'd say no as well.
Yeah. And even now, it'd be unthinkable for guys like us to talk about some of the things that we're talking about on a radio station. Yeah. I mean, podcasting makes this possible.
It does make it possible.
You know?
Yeah.
So, and you know, the powers that be normally pick the personalities that they want, so maybe it's a marketing decision more than anything else.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, until next time, I think we have some trolley problems to try to figure out.
All right. Oh, wait a minute. Words of wisdom.
Ooh, give me one.
Oh, I don't know, you. I was going to put it on you.
I did it last time. You got to give me some words of wisdom.
Words of wisdom. Mm-hmm. Oh, man. Words of wisdom. Mm-hmm. I always ask other people this because nothing seems to sort of pop out at me, but... Okay, go ahead.
I think I got some.
All right, yeah.
Put better brakes on trolleys.
Very nice. We'll end there.